Hello, I'm Dazzling One, and this week I want to address an important subject matter that I believe is integral in understanding the entire conspiracy at large, and that is the Jesuits. So, like everything that I discuss on this channel, I'm usually learning just as much as you are as I am presenting it because it takes me time to do research because I'm not a walking robot. And although I amassed a great deal of information, it's still not as thorough as I wanted it to be. So some will go as far to say that the real powers that control the world are the Jesuits, or some will say the Zionists. And they are thought to be involved to multiple assassinations such as JFK, revolutions, using subversive tactics to manipulate government, and using Hegelian dialect, deception, in politics by creating, infiltrating, controlling multiple sides to further their own agenda. So some view them as more of a militaristic organization rather than a religious one. And they are believed to be controlling the Vatican as well as be tied to Freemasons. So they're suspected of being Gnostics rather than this false Christianity that they're perpetuating. And so if you look at just many Catholic churches and things, and not to malign Catholics, but my problem with it has always been the lack of belief in grace, going through the priest for confessions rather than going to God directly. And of course, this whole worship of Mary, which, if you go back to the mystery religions, there was always this female goddess side. And if you look at things like the obelisk, which you can find it here in Washington, D.C., and you can also find it in the Vatican, it's a phallic symbol modeled after Nimrod's genitalia. And it has an esoteric meaning to it. But the point of this whole subject is that we can see there are a lot of fishy things about it. And even with the symbol for the Jesuits, you can see the sun ray symbol. And just last week, I did a video on the zodiac and how the antediluvian world, as well as in the days of antiquity, after the flood, they worshipped the planets, the stars, the sun, the moon, and the luminaries, and they looked to them because they believed they were the balance of the universe. So it's very interesting that even though this is considered a Christian organization, it has very many pagan symbolisms within it. So the Jesuits are also known as the Society of Jesus, or colloquially as God's Marines, and they date back to Rome, and they're founded by Ignacio Lopez, or more properly known as Ignatius de Loyola, and I probably butchered that man's name, but anyways, he was a Spanish soldier, and he turned to a priest on August 15th, 1534, and he basically wanted a Roman Catholic order priest and brothers. So some will point to it and say that it was founded on the satanic holiday called the Feast Day of Lucifer. And I tried to look more into this, but I really couldn't find anything further on this Feast Day of Lucifer. But it is listed as a satanic holiday, and I don't really know a lot about satanic holidays. So some will say that the Jesuits take an extreme oath of induction or a blood oath, and they say it's confirmed by former Jesuit priests such as Father Alberto Rivera, and he's confirmed it. And they say also that Malachi Martin has, and he's another former Jesuit priest. So Ignatius and 6 other young men, including Francis Xavier and Peter Faber, gathered and professed vows of poverty, chastity, and later obedience, including a special vow of obedience to the Pope in matters of mission, direction, and assignment. Ignatius' plan of the order's organization was approved by Pope Paul III in 1540 by a bull containing the formula of the Institute. So today, the Jesuits are the largest men's single religious order of priests and brothers in the Catholic Church. So I think that's pretty interesting. And also another thing you can look at is that the Grand Master Adam Weishaupt, the guy who's often seen as the founder of the Illuminati, he was educated at a Jesuit college, and so they were part of what we think of as the Counter-Reformation. There was a Reformation with Martin Luther breaking away, and basically Protestantism and Catholicism. So he viewed the Roman Catholic Church or the Papal Dynasty as the Antichrist, and he used 2 Thessalonians 1 through 12, and I'm just going to read it briefly for you. Concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered to him, we ask you, brothers and sisters, not to become easily unsettled or alarmed by the teaching allegedly from us, whether by prophecy or by word of mouth, or by letter, asserting that the day of the Lord has already come. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Don't you remember that when I was with you, I used to tell you these things? And now you know what is holding him back, so that he may be revealed at the proper time. For the secret power of lawlessness is already at work, but the one who now holds it back will continue to do so till he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and all the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth but have delighted in wickedness. As to the grand deception, and he's saying that rather than the Antichrist being a single entity, it is actually a group, and that group is the Catholic Church. And so some people have gone as far to say that the Jesuits actually came up with this ideal of a 7-year tribulation, a single Antichrist, with a term called futurist. And they say that it was drafted by Francisco de Ribera, who lived between 1537 and 1591, and Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, which lived between 1542 and 1621. And a little background on both of the guys. So Francisco Ribera was a Spanish doctor of theology who wrote a 500-page Latin commentary on Revelation Apocalypse entitled In Sacram Beati Ionis Apostoli, and some other stuff in Latin, and published it about the year 1590. And this commentary was never translated into any other language, and it was for the eyes of the hierarchy only. And then, of course, you have Robert Bellarmine. He was an Italian doctor of theology and is best known for his opposition to fellow Jesuit Galileo, and his heliocentric theory. He also wrote a book in Latin entitled, and once again it's in Latin, I'm not going to try to read Latin and butcher it, but he had polemic lectures concerning the disputed points of the Christian belief against heretics of the time. This book follows the basic outline of Francisco de Rivera's book, with the reign of Antichrist limited to a few years way off in the future before the end of time. And of course, later, John Nelson Darby, he further elaborated on this system by inventing a secret rapture 7 years before the end. And they correctly taught that the Christians are restraining evil, in this case, Protestant Christians, will be removed from the rapture before the Antichrist will be revealed. And of course, in popular literature, these are basically the 6 pieces to futurism that people often discuss when they're talking about the ideal of the futurist pre-tribulation rapture being propagated by Jesuits. They'll say, number 1, the Antichrist was one man, not a dynasty. Number 2, he would be an atheist or infidel. Number 3, he would be revealed in till 7 years before the end of time. Number 4, he would sit in a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem and make a covenant with the Jews. Number 5, he would call himself God. And number 6, the Christians were hindering his appearance, but they would be caught up or raptured to heaven before his appearance, hence left behind. So, right there, I just want to stop and just kind of give you my own view of this. I find the whole thing with the Jesuits coming up with the futurist point of view concerning the interpretation of prophecy very interesting. But I will say that I still hold to the belief that the Antichrist is one man, because even when I read in 2 Thessalonians 1 through 12, it constantly said one man. Now, I am a Protestant, and I came across this article because I was really interested in learning about the futurist view and it being propagated by Jesuits. And I agree with the author of this. He said that just because there are people in the early Reformation and we agree on some aspects, just like there's people on YouTube that I agree with sometimes and sometimes I don't agree with them, or there's people I read and I agree with them sometimes but I don't agree with them on everything. When it comes to their beliefs, it doesn't mean that I'm going to share it 100% verbatim. And so I just find them controlling how we interpret prophecy very fascinating, because I've always kind of wondered, how do we have it all down? How does anyone have it all down? Even though I know God speaks to certain people, and I do believe that there's still miracles, healing, and prophecy, but I do think there are a lot of false prophets and a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing out there who are masquerading themselves as something they aren't and taking advantage of the scattered sheep. But at the same time, I find it interesting that when you really get into this history with the Jesuits, that they are taking the Bible and they're fixing translations and so forth. And like anything that you learn about, there's always more to the story. But I'm going to hold to my futuristic beliefs that prophecy is still to be fulfilled in some areas, because when I read my Bible, a lot of this stuff has not happened yet. But I do think they have mixed in some lies. And like in the video I did on the 7-year tribulation and the peace treaty, I gave what I believe when I read the Bible, and after doing some studying, what I believe the peace treaty and what the 7-year tribulation was, and how I believe that it wasn't 7 whole years but 3.5, because constantly it says 42 months. The whole peace treaty that many speak of, people are waiting for, I believe they will have a peace treaty as a political move and as a way to get people to believe that prophecy is unfolding. But I believe that that treaty that people are thinking of is between Yeshua when he came and he made the covenant with all people. He made it with many. And so those are my beliefs as far as futurists go. And then even with the rapture, I hold more of a post-tribulation rapture point of view. But if you believe in pre-tribulation rapture, because many of my subscribers and people who watch these videos do, I'm not going to malign you or demonize you for believing in that viewpoint and tell you that, oh, you're wrong and blah, blah, blah. To me, as long as you're living right, as long as you're ready at all times, does it really matter if he comes and gets us before or after? I mean, yes, it does matter in the sense that we don't have to go through it. And I do believe that we all want to be counted worthy to escape, which is up for understanding what that means as well. But the point is, I just wanted to say that even though I know that there are parts that the Jesuits manipulate, just like any truth, there also is, the best lies are mixed with the truth. If you're going to lie to someone, you don't just tell them a flat-out lie, you mix it with the truth. And so even though they have done some manipulation to certain things, I'm not going to throw everything out I hear just because, oh, the Jesuits had their hands in it, is what I'm trying to say. And that's pretty much my point of view and where I stand on the issue in terms of how they came in and interpreted prophecy. Some people will also talk about how the Jesuits were commissioned by the Pope to develop a new interpretation of Scripture that would counteract the Protestant application of the Bible of prophecies regarding the Antichrist to the Roman Catholic Church. And so they'll start talking about how the Jesuits start editing the Bible, and they had the Council of Trent that met. from 1545 to 1563 in an effort to rally the forces of the Catholic Church to combat what they considered the heresies of the Reformation and their Bibles. So the Catholic Church decided that the Latin Vulgate should be their official Bible and none other allowed. And so the problem was that even when they made this decree, there was no settled text or single Latin Vulgate considered authoritative, and their own language reveals this. So many people who are proponents of the King James Bible and saying that if you're going to preach or teach, you cannot use any other version because NIV, the English Standard Version, and many of these other new translations coming out are perverted because they're taking out words, they're removing things, or they're changing words. And a lot of this has to do with this whole Vulgate. Now, they say that it's just a little modernized version, but much of what's the new biblical translation is coming off the Latin Vulgate. And I think it's an interesting debate. I do believe that it does say in the Bible that we're not supposed to really change his word or take things out, and it's sad that the NIV does that. Whenever I'm doing a video, I try to stick to the King James version of the Bible, but if someone's using the NIV, I'm not going to demonize them. But I will say I have seen some huge discrepancies in the NIV and other versions of the Bible. Even, once again, it goes back to the ideal that the people of the Bible spoke Hebrew. Later, a lot of it was translated to Greek, and many people translate it from Greek to Latin or to English. So you'll find whenever you're looking up a lot of these words in Hebrew, it can have an entirely different meaning. So it's interesting because our current Pope is a Jesuit, and many people were really going on about this whenever he first came onto the scene in March of 2013, and they said he was the Black Pope because the father, the head Jesuit, is known as the Black Pope. So, the society was engaged in evangelization and apostolic ministry in 112 nations on 6 continents, and they're also linked to the Spanish Inquisition as well. They didn't start it, but they kind of took over it. They're also linked to having some pretty strong ties to control of education. And I mentioned earlier that Adam Weishaupt was educated at a Jesuit school, and by the 17th century, there was more than 500 Jesuit schools established across Europe. The Jesuits' standardized curriculum and teaching methods became the basis of many education systems today. The Jesuits were great patrons of art, using murals and theaters to convey their messages to as a wide audience as possible. So, right there you can see that many of our schools today, many people link the control of the curriculum, what children learn in school, in high schools and colleges, to the Jesuits as well. But some famous Ivy League schools that are Jesuit schools are Stonyhurst College in the UK, Georgetown University in the US, Fordham University here in the US, Fairfield University here in the US, and then there's the International Visitor Leadership Program, which is also here in the United States. So, as you can see, I have this belief, and many do. Whoever controls the curriculum can control people, because if you have to go to school from nowadays, I think preschool is almost mandatory. I didn't go to preschool, I started in kindergarten, but from preschool to being a senior in high school for 13 to 14 years, then you're able to have some influence on their minds. And so it's just interesting to see that they've set up many universities and churches, and they have their hands in many areas of society. And then some plots they were involved in. So, Jesuits were implicated in plots to overthrow Elizabeth I. They were also associated with the Gunpowder Plot to destroy Parliament after James I made the order illegal, and during this time all Catholics in Britain were told they must recant their Catholicism or face death. So it's just interesting to see their ties to different things, and also going back to how our current Pope is a Jesuit, I just want to say that if they have as much pull as people say, and I really do believe they do, then you'll see that there's never anything really bad ever said about Pope Francis. He's like this beloved guy, not only to Catholics, but to atheists and to all religions, because this guy is about peace and love. I mean, everything he wants, he gets. So basically, I'm saying is, if you're the one pulling the strings and you're on their team, you're going to make your guys look good. I mean, sometimes you're going to make some sort of conflict, because if everything goes too smoothly and too perfect, people will begin to question, why is things so easy for them? Why are they not facing criticism? But at the same time, you want to make your people and your agenda look the most polished. And so I think it's interesting that you can find Pope Francis linked to them as well. But in closing, I just want to say that I've definitely, from the little bit I've discussed on the Jesuits, I mean, it's further than that. I've learned so much, and I think it's something that I would encourage anyone who is starting a conspiracy to look into. I'm sure some of you guys know more about this than me, clearly, but I just want to say that it's a very interesting topic to look into, and you should do it. And I hope you guys learned from this video. I had it all jumbled up because whenever I was getting my notes together, I just bullet pointed everything I wanted to discuss, and I scrolled around because I was like, oh, this is interesting and that is interesting, and I want to touch that point and this point. But like I said, thank you for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care, and Yahweh bless you.